I was inspired to work in STEM because I think being a maker is essential to what makes us human. I love any kind of science, technology, math, engineering. I think that all ties into this creative kind of learning, and that's where we as humanity are best, is when we're making and solving problems and using that creativity to make the world a better place. So I work in an interactive video conferencing studio, and at first I thought, well, that can't be the same, and what I'm really good at is connecting with students, and I wonder how this is going to go. But it turns out it's exactly the same. It is me seeing them every day. They're on the screen, but we joke around, we get to know each other. The best part of my job is when you see a student with that aha moment, that you know they get to take that piece of learning and it's going to stay with them forever and they can use it. So I grew up in the inner city. I went to a really large high school, and I serve students who go to very small schools. One of my schools only has 35 students. So I have to be careful to make sure my own perception of the world is not, that I acknowledge their perception may be different. My suggestion, if you're new to working in a rural area, is to be open to the students' experiences and meet them where they are. They may have vastly different backgrounds, especially in a high school that may pull from multiple middle schools. And if you meet them where they are, you can bring them along to the same place. They don't have to come in with the same set of skills to walk out with a really powerful learning experience. I travel more than any other classroom teacher I know. Interestingly, I visit all my students who are across the state. Right now I have 9 different sites, so I visit 9 different schools through the course of a semester. I think the power is getting to know people in other communities, and not just like reading about them, but actually getting to know them. So one thing I do when I visit my students is I ask them to tell me where to go eat, and I ask them to tell me their favorite places. And I go there, and I do those things. I've had the best cheese biscuit ever on the East Coast of North Carolina. You know, I visited the white squirrels in Western North Carolina, and I think when you invest in a community and consider the differences of context, then they know they're respected. I think working as an educator in STEM is more difficult than working in STEM. I was a programmer for 10 years, and that was pretty easy. There's all kinds of work, and you go out and do it. And I do feel like I chose ethical projects to work on. I did a lot of support for nonprofits. But educating is different. You're bringing someone else along into that process, and not everyone has the same amount of resources or background. And so that's more of a challenge, but it's also a lot more fun. Our country can support rural educators and people who are geographically isolated by making sure that they have access to not only technology, but the internet, that we make sure that we have connection, which is such an issue in rural areas, and that they feel supported in knowing that their work is valuable, perhaps even more valuable, because they're serving students who wouldn't otherwise have that opportunity. And that's so critical to the success of our whole nation. I think it's important to know what your core values are and to reflect really thoughtfully on what they are, because they're what keep you going through the hard times. My core values are kindness, creativity, persistence, joyfulness, and healthiness. And if I'm healthy and I'm joyful and I'm, creative, then I can be persistent. I can just keep going through when things are challenging. I think it's important to teach computer science as a broad discipline and not simply coding. That computer science is something we do, or we should do, in every class. That we apply it to math, we apply it in science. We also apply it in language arts. And the ways that we think about news media, for example, are influenced by computers in ways that most people aren't aware. So for example, if you're in a country that has repressed media right now, we can still understand what the news is in that place by looking at what's happening on Twitter. And aggregating that data is a science, a data science that can be transformative. We can understand how people are being affected by regimes that don't have open media by using computer science. And when we take this one small idea of coding and explode it into being able to apply it across disciplines, that's really powerful learning. And then computational thinking is a way of seeing the world that allows people to describe their world in a way that a computer can understand. And they also can take a big problem and break it down into many more smaller, manageable problems. That's something you can apply in anything, any discipline, any class that you take. You can also problem solve for your life using these skills, and that's why we should teach it. That's why it's really important. I do think it's important to say there's been some push about equity, and equity being like, we can teach computational thinking and computer science without computers. And I am a firm believer in unplugged activities. Those are really important. But we also need to give students access to technology, or they will not catch up with their peers. We must give them some access. And that access can be a phone, it can be a tablet, it can be a computer. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as they have access. That's the key. I believe my job makes a difference in the world. I believe that when we change lives that wouldn't otherwise be touched by the work that I do, then we change our cities, our nation. We give opportunities to kids who, it's not about like whether or not they learned computer science. It's about whether or not they believe they can go out and accomplish something.